today we are here with a fabulous real estate investor, author of the 30-Day Stay book, real estate agent who specializes in creative financing, and a fellow avid traveler who's been to 48 countries. Welcome, Zeona McIntyre, to the show.
Thank you. We had so much fun chatting before this. We were like, we should probably press record.
I know.
And all the goods out.
I mean, that's like why I started a podcast, though, because it's like, I feel like I have so many great conversations with people. And I'm like, we should be recording this.
Yeah.
I love that. Well, so obviously, Zeona, you have all of these accolades and so many things that you've accomplished, which has been incredible. But like, so who was Zeona before the real estate investing, before the business? Like, who was Zeona?
That's an interesting question. I think I'm like an entrepreneur from birth. It's funny how some people, I think we just have this thing. And so my father was an entrepreneur and he was always just like hustler, very gray area type of person. I'd like to think that I'm a little less gray area, but he definitely gave me a lot of that like ideas and creativity and wanting to make deals happen and everything. So, I mean, even from like middle school, I feel like I was selling candy bars and I was like, selling pictures of celebrities. I was like doing so many little hustles even around school. And so I've literally just been doing it forever. And in my household, my dad used to say that going to college was a failure. Like if you went to college, you weren't doing your own shit. And I'm like, holy cow. So, I mean, I still went to college, but I don't have a 4-year degree. And I really think that stuck in the back of my mind that like, I need to create my own way.
Yeah. Okay. That is where, out of curiosity, where's your dad from?
He's from California, but he didn't go to college. And I honestly think it was just him kind of validating his choices and his path. Okay. He wasn't a very academic person, but I still think he was very clever. Yeah. So yeah, I think that was more about him than anybody else.
No, and it's so funny you say that because my dad was kind of the same way. Like he actually did ended up working in corporate, but before that, he always had this entrepreneurial spirit and he always told me like, make sure you do something for yourself, make sure you create something for yourself. So like, there was always that a part of me. And like, I found myself also kind of being a hustler at a young age. Like I was doing social media stuff before social media even was a thing, but like on a minor scale, like I was the sales rep for Boots, or in college, I was like the ring rep for the like yearly ring or whatever. And things like that. I was like, how can I make money in other ways that are unconventional?
Totally. Yeah. So, but I mean, now it's like that allows me to see so many different avenues that people don't even see because my mind has been trained to be looking for opportunities all the time.
Yeah. So I guess, you went to college. What happened after that?
Yeah. Gosh, timelines. After college, my mother instilled in me that I would never need to do something that wasn't fun or enjoyable.
Love that.
And I think that in some ways was a benefit, in some ways it wasn't, because I would just quit jobs that I didn't like. And I think it was because she felt so forced. She was a single mom and she was taking care of us mostly. My dad was kind of in and out of the picture, but just not very stable. And so for her, she just probably felt trapped in her life and wanted me to have something different.
Yeah.
And so I have kind of followed just my bliss, followed what was fun, what was interesting at the time. And I think that led me to a lot of, unusual jobs. I worked as a tour guide driving all over the US with a bunch of foreigners. And I've worked in a marijuana dispensary out of curiosity. I mean, like I've done so many random jobs for a little while.
I love that. And I mean, it's funny because it all kind of brought you to here, right? And it's like, I do think we do put a lot of pressure on, young kids, especially coming out of college and stuff. It's like, you got to go to college. You got to go get the job. It's like, we almost feel the need to be successful so young these days, even though our prefrontal cortexes aren't even fully developed until we're 25, which is like, so wild. But yeah, there is kind of that catch-22 where it's like, if you just follow your passion the entire time, like passion dies very easily. Like it can die very easily. And like, I know for me, for example, I really had to stay focused. Like, it's like, you got to stay focused in order to actually accomplish something great, and you got to like put the work in and go through the grit to accomplish something great. So it's kind of this weird balance.
Yeah. And I mean, it's interesting because Airbnb, where, that kind of turned into my career being in real estate, it sort of just fell into my lap out of a curiosity and an idea that it might be a side hustle.
Mm-hmm.
So I was out of college, but I joined a massage college. I was going to be a massage therapist. And at that time, I was really focused on that degree and like, am I going to open up a clinic and have people work under me? Like, how was I going to hustle that? And a friend of mine told me about Airbnb. And this is like 2011. So it's not a household name. It was very like suspect to have people in your house. But for me, I was open to it because I had done a lot of couch surfing. So I'm not sure if you're familiar with that website, but that was before Airbnb for travelers.
Yep.
And the premise was you just got to go stay on people's couches, or if they had a spare room, or camp on their floor.
And that's how Airbnb started too. Like it was literally air, bed, and breakfast. And it was like people would put up air mattresses.
Totally. Yeah. So I loved it because I had stayed all over Europe couch surfing. And then I had hosted a ton of people because I used to live in Hawaii and people wanted to go there.
Yeah.
So the idea of having someone come to my house was not unusual. And then they were going to pay me. I was like, yeah, okay. That'll work. Better.
Oh my gosh. So I guess, how did you get from one property to scaling up to your portfolio now? And what does your portfolio look like now?
Yeah. So my portfolio is 8 properties. It's a mix of long-term, midterm, short-term, and it's 11 units among those 8. And then I have at times managed a ton. So I think I've managed over 60 properties in 5 countries.
Gosh. Okay. That's a lot.
But I don't love management. So I've really scaled back. And, it's that I've had this history now of like 12 years of being in this game. So it's cool that you can start somewhere and think, okay, it's all just Airbnb or it's all just real estate, but you can do it like 10 different ways. So I feel like I've had a ton of careers. And but to go back to your question of how I went from one to scaling, when I started, I didn't have any money. I was a broke college student. I was working for like a little bit above minimum wage. I didn't own anything. I didn't have money for a down payment. But what I did have was an apartment I was renting out and furniture. And so when I had a roommate that wanted to move out, I had this spare room and it was furnished with my stuff. And I had heard about Airbnb. I was like, well, I don't have to buy anything. I have sheets and towels. Like, let's just put it up and see. And if it sucks, I'll get a roommate,
Yeah.
And that little moment has, turned into an entire career over this many years. So it is really cool how you can just try something on and see what you want to do with it. Yeah.
No, I completely love that because my story was a little bit different, but kind of similar because I was renting a 2-bedroom, 1-bath duplex, basically. So I was renting the upper unit. I didn't really even know what a duplex was. I was just like, I don't know. It's like a 2-story house thing. I don't know. And so I was living on top, but the rent was a little high. And I was like, I think I want to I don't really want a roommate full time, but I want to rent out the room for the weekends. And so I had a coworker who lived close to the office and I lived in the city in New Orleans. I was like, and she liked coming into the city in the weekend. So I was like, oh, well, I can rent this to you. So I would charge her to stay for the weekends. And I was like, wait, this is awesome. I was like, I'm making extra money. This is genius. And that's really when I started looking more into real estate investing and house hacking. I was like, oh my God, there's a whole world out there that I didn't even know.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, house hacking, the best gateway drug there is.
Truly.
But yeah, for me, it was so easy to kind of go from just having the room and then renting out my room and trying to I was pet sitting, I was babysitting. I was trying to get out of my house as much as possible so that I could be renting out both rooms.
Yeah.
And then eventually just rented another apartment until I could afford to buy. So there are so many cool ways to scale. And even property management for me was a way because I was like, okay, I can't rent or buy unlimited properties, but I could take on 10 new clients and 10 new houses.
Yeah.
So there are so many ways to do it.
Yeah. So I guess tell me a little bit more about the property management side of things. Both how did you like get new clients, but then also, I know you said you scaled down a lot. Like what parts of it didn't you like? Because I also am not like so many people have asked me to start a property management company. I'm like, no, I'm not doing it.
Don't do it.
I'm like,
you don't need
absolutely not.
Well, I would just want to say that property management is the worst part of real estate.
Yeah.
But that's kind of why it's easy to get clients, right? Because
Mhm.
people don't know what they're doing, they don't have time, and it's such a hassle.
Yeah.
So, at least at the time that I started doing it, probably around 2015 or 2016, Airbnb was starting to get to be known, but there were people that wanted to do it or take advantage of it and just didn't have the time. And
Mhm.
so a lot of it was just word of mouth. And that's how I started even consulting, is that people wanted to know more about how to do it and they just kind of spread the word. So it was easy for me to get them around Boulder where I live. And I think a lot of people think that, oh, if I'm going to manage a property, it has to be full time. Well, one of the things that's kind of great about our town, and this is common in many towns, is that Airbnb is only allowed if it's your primary residence.
Mhm.
So that means that you couldn't really have a full time Airbnb, but there are a lot of people that travel often for work. They
Yep.
may travel up to 6 months and still have it be their primary residence. So you can take on those kinds of clients and just turn them on and off, where it's like, okay, they're going for a 3-month trip. I'll manage it all that time and then otherwise not have it. So that's kind of what I did here.
I love that. Well, and so right now, I know you have a home base in Colorado. So do you rent and you travel a lot, right? So I guess, can you tell me a little bit about like what your lifestyle is like now, how you travel, what that looks like?
Yeah. So I always traveled, kind of
Same.
like what you said. It's like, it's been in my blood for as long as I can remember. So when I wanted to buy a house, I knew that, like, I don't know, maybe it's the share economy that's like so deep in my blood. But like when I first had my own place that I owned, it was like I was renting it all the time. I was
Yep.
renting my car all the time on Turo. Like everything had to be used, put
Yeah.
to use. Um, yeah. So I guess that's just kind of like my life philosophy. And I feel like I lost your question. So
No, you're good.
remember.
Yeah. So I guess what does your lifestyle look
Oh,
like
what does it
now?
look like
Yeah.
now? Yeah. So now I own a 3-bedroom. My husband owns it, but we have a 3-bedroom townhome here in Boulder. And Boulder is expensive.
Yeah.
And, now this townhome seems really affordable, which is
Crazy.
why I tell people to buy. Definitely buy, because even 4 years ago, we were like, I can't believe how expensive it is. And now it's cheap.
Yep.
But our place, we rent it out. We can rent it up to 6 months. So we usually ride like the 4-month minimum and then maybe up to 6 months if we have a big travel year. And the way that we travel often is we pet sit. So we're on an app and we go around to, it could be just even in the Colorado mountains where we're snowboarding all winter time, or Hawaii where I grew up, or France where my husband's from. A lot of times now we just pet sit and we don't even have to rent a place. And that pet sitting exchange is free, but we rent out our home here and we can make between like $250 and $500 a night. So it more than pays for our mortgage for the year and then some of our travel.
I love that. I know. And it's so funny because, so like my family, like especially my parents, they're very adamant about like, you can't have strangers in the house, where I'm just like, I really don't care. I don't know. I'm so like not attached to items really. Like I don't really care if you sit on my couch or if you use my knives. It's just stuff to me. So I'm like, yeah, I might as well rent it out. Otherwise it's just going to sit empty. And then what use is that? It's like wasted space.
Yeah. And it's not even about not caring. Like I even enjoy it on the other side, because there have been times like you where I had a second room and I was just like renting that out versus renting out my whole space, which is what I do now. But in those times, it was so rich. Like a roommate would be someone that you see all the time. And yes, you have a relationship with, but they start to get on your nerves. They start doing things around the house or leaving dishes in the sink or whatever. But an Airbnb roommate, they're not there most of the time because they're out looking at stuff in your town. And some days is just vacant because that's just the nature of it. And then other times it's these really cool travelers that you sort of feel like you have this like synchronistic meeting and you end up forming these great relationships and taking them in town and being a tour guide. So it's like a really beautiful exchange.
I love that. And I think that's like why I still am so adamant about like when I travel, I love to stay in like co-living places. I've like, grown out of
Totally.
the hostels because it gets a little tough after a little bit once you start to get
Yeah,
older.
we're
But
old.
like exactly. But I love that there's like a surgence now of like co-living boutique hostel type of things that are really nice, and you get your own room, you get your own bathroom, and the place is super cute, but you're meeting like other people in their either like late 20s, mid 30s, who are also traveling and are digital nomads, and they have these
Yeah,
crazy beautiful stories, and I'm like, this is what it's all about.
totally. Yeah.
um
And we were talking about this before that it's like travel sounds really lovely, but it's also super lonely or can
mhm.
be. Right. So it's so nice. Like, that's the whole reason why hostels are great is that you have these like built in friends right at the get go. And so a co working, co living kind of slightly upscale boutique hotel could be even better. Yeah.
Yes, I love that. And I love that you do pet sitting as well, because I don't pet sit since I have a dog myself. Actually, I should probably just get on there and see like if
You
they
still
allow
can.
other dogs. Yeah, I
Yeah.
honestly should probably look into that. Maybe I'll look into that because I don't have a house yet for June. So
There you
I'm
go.
literally like bumping around and figuring it out as I go, which is, the beauty of this. But it's such a great way to travel for free. So it's like even if you're renting right now, or even if you wanted to
Totally.
like get rid of your lease and just take a year off, you could go around pet sitting. And a lot of the time they're like pretty nice places too, because it's like people
Yeah.
who, have big, either not, it doesn't have to be a big house, but it could be a townhouse or a condo or whatever. And they want someone to both house sit and pet sit for free. And it's fantastic.
Yeah, and there's profiles on there, right? So not only are you seeing the pets, but you do see the house, and you can get an idea of like, okay, this house looks kind of cluttered or junky. Well, maybe that's not the one that I want for what I'm looking for. And even now, it's almost like staying at an Airbnb. We're going right away to the amenities. Like, we've gotten spoiled. So I want a nice house, and I also want like a hot tub, or I want a
Yep.
pool table, or I want something fun to do while we're there. So we, all of that is listed in the profile. So it's great to see that.
I love that.
And another thing is that I know a lot of people that have fully sold their homes and they pet sit full time.
Hmm.
And I think people don't realize that you can string them together. But even if you wanted to live in a town like Boulder or Denver, Colorado has so many pet sits.
Yeah.
You could literally just stay in town and pets it all the time. So
Yeah.
it just depends on, how much moving around you can take. But I've also seen pet sits that are multi-month. So it can be a great thing.
I love. And so I guess what websites are you using for pet sitting?
I just use trusted house sitters,
Yeah.
and I can send you a coupon if people want to try it out. They have like 25% off. There is a membership for the year, but after that, you can use it for if you want people to pet sit at your place and to travel. And I think it's such a deal because, especially if you were boarding your animal, that can be like $500 a week.
Have you heard of Kindred?
I have. I can't remember. That's not a home exchange, but it's
Yeah,
like a second home platform, right?
Yeah, no, so it is a home exchange, but you can also just like earn credit. So basically, you let
Yeah.
someone stay at your place for free, they pay the cleaning fee, but then you can also go and stay at other places for free.
Yeah.
Or you can do a home swap with someone. But like, I find it to be really good to use kind of like in the low seasons, right? And it's like, it doesn't count as renting out your place on Airbnb. So if I want to go somewhere, like I'll just like I've got 30 credits on Kindred right now. So I'm like looking at places to stay in Denver on Kindred.
That's great. Yeah.
Yeah.
I have had people tell me about it, and it's just like not quite clicked for me. I think I've tried to use, there's another website called Home Exchange,
Mm,
and it's just never come together. And
yeah.
so sometimes it just feels like one website or the other works for you. Like Rover is a pet sitting
Yep.
and pet walking site. I've had no luck on that. So
That's fair.
I've got mine that works. I'm good with it.
That is so fair. I love that.
Yeah.
Okay, so I know you said you got that first property after kind of doing like sort of like a semi-rental arbitrage thing. How did you
Yeah.
scale to 8 properties?
Yeah. So, I mean, over time, I think that these days with social media, people are like,
Mhm.
oh my God, it was overnight. I, went from 1 to 10. It wasn't like that for me. It was really like one a year kind of idea. And then just over time, you have this larger portfolio. And I've definitely sold some and traded into bigger properties and stuff like that. But it has been like slow, steady wins the race.
No, I love that. And it's, social media does kind of make it seem like, oh my gosh, you go from zero to hero in 0.5 seconds. But like people also don't realize there are people that do that. Like literally I'm seeing Tony and Sarah Robinson later this week up in San Diego or in California. And they literally went from 0 to 30 properties in 2 years, but it was a grind, right? And it's like partnering with so many people and like really building a giant business. So it's like, you really have to figure out for yourself, what do you want? What are you doing this real estate investing for? Is it going to be a full-time giant big business with a bunch of employees, or is it just like, I want this to support my lifestyle? Like you have to figure out for yourself what that looks like.
And are you going to flame out like just as quickly as you build? Are you going to crash, or are you building something for a lifetime that's going to support you?
Totally.
Right. So for me, it's all about sustainability, and now knowing that maybe I don't like property management, right? And maybe I'm not even the best operator there is. I think at the time that I grew up with Airbnb, there wasn't any competition. If you basically had a furnished space, didn't matter what it looked like.
Yeah.
Now it has to be a boutique hotel that is like professionally designed with all the amenities you could imagine. The competition is fierce, and running that kind of operation where it's going to be so perfect every time takes quite a system. And that's just not me, right? So I am lucky enough that I got to make my money in it at the time that I did. And now I can pivot my strategy, and I'm doing a lot more syndications and funds that are actually passive.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people get into real estate thinking, oh my gosh, it's so passive, it's going to be great. It is not. In most cases, real estate is a lot of work, and that's okay because we get, rich quickly. But I'm definitely moving towards that more passive experience.
I feel like that's going to be me within the next like 10 years. I'm like still relatively young where I've got a lot of energy. Let's go. Right. Good. But I already am always thinking of my exit strategy because I know, especially once I start having kids and I start doing there's all these factors where I know myself and I ebb and flow in terms of my energy levels, in terms of what I want to do, in terms of where I want to be. Right now, I'm in a really like go, love having fun, love hustling, love creating, love doing all this stuff. But I also know I'm going to hit a phase where I'm like, I kind of like enjoy chilling and I want to stay home and I want to like have a garden and I want to,
Yeah. It's about having the option.
Yeah. That's all real estate investing is at the beginning too. It's like just it gives you more optionality. So even with my corporate job, like my whole thing for getting my properties is I wanted the option to be able to quit my job if it did not feel right for me anymore, Yeah. I love that. Well, so, you mentioned syndications. For anyone who doesn't know, what does that even mean? What does that look like?
Yeah, it's basically a group trying to get funding for a larger project, right? So that project could be a bar, it could be a mobile home park, it could be a storage facility, it could be a boutique hotel, right? And say they need $5 million, but they're going to fundraise through a lot of investors that might only put in $50,000 each, right? So they get like a group investment. And the difference between a syndication and a fund is a fund, they can repeatedly invest in projects without kind of running it by you. And the syndication, it is only one project, and then they go out and they get more money for the next project. The fund is continually raising money into their one bucket, I guess.
I love that. I love that. And so I remember earlier this year, you posted post about how you read a book, Rich as Fuck by Amanda Frances. I know, so funny because I was at this point where I was like, I'm not reading any more books this quarter. I'm going to focus on, I had read 10X is easier than 2X or whatever. And I was like, I'm only focusing on this and $100 million offers by Alex Hormozy, and that's it. But I saw your post and I was like, that seems interesting. Let me give it a listen. I listened to it and was like, I feel like my whole world and paradigm totally changed.
Wow, I love that. Yeah.
Like literally, it was incredible. And so I guess like what got you into like reading that kind of a book, and what were some of the money blocks that you had before? Because I think what a lot of
Yeah.
people don't realize is a lot of what's keeping them back, it's up in here, right? It's in your head, and it's like
100,000%.
working through a lot, right? But no one ever talks about that. No one ever talks about that. And it's so funny because like in my coaching program, I really focus on mindset first with like my students. I'm like, we got to work on this, and you got to have the belief in yourself that you can do it first.
Yeah. It's like, what money blocks do I still have? And that's the whole thing, is that I grew up pretty poor, and my parents had a lot of fluctuating income. It's like sometimes my dad would hit it big and we would have some money for a minute, and he was really not great with money. And so he would blow it on all kinds of toys. So he'd rent a house that was too expensive, get some fancy cars and scooters and whatever, and then we would run out.
Yeah.
So I had this really like weird feast or famine, scarcity, fear of insecurity that was going on in my life. And I knew that I wanted to be different than my parents. And that threw me into personal finance and education in that space, like as early as college, which is such a gift. You know, I wanted to do the opposite. And so that started with, you know, Susie Orman, who's an older kind of money teacher, and she's much more conservative than I agree with now. And then it kind of moved into the FIRE movement. Like I kind of like grew with that as it started happening. And the FIRE movement is financial independence, retire early.
Yep.
And so that has a lot of basis in frugality and, you know, investing in stocks. And real estate is a little bit faster way to kind of get to that. So I definitely have a lot of great structures, but I also have this underlying fear and insecurity and scarcity that never really went away, even when I was out earning it. So I have been really wanting to turn to that and say like, okay, what is it that I can do to heal this? And so it is definitely still a journey for me. And this Amanda Frances book has really helped a lot. But I noticed that if I don't continually keep in some kind of practice, I can creep back into my old habits that are not really serving me. So one thing I'm doing now is I have a hiking thing that I'm doing with my friend where we listen to one chapter of the book, and then we go to a coffee shop and we journal, because she's got all these journal prompts. And then I have another group that we meet once a week. It's 2 other women, and we listen to one chapter of her online course, the Money Mentality Makeover. And then we do those journal prompts. So it is kind of overlapping, but for now I'm like, okay, this is great. And then let me see what else I'm going to need. But it's definitely like alive. It's an active thing that needs to be nurtured for me.
I love that. And honestly, same here too. And the funny thing is, like, I never thought that I had any money blocks, right? Like, I was like, I'm doing just fine with money. And it's like, especially during college, I was making or not during college, after college, when I started my corporate job, I was making 6 figures pretty comfortably, like was just fine. And then it was funny because even when I left my corporate job, I kind of was able to replace my income pretty quickly, but not go over that. And I was like, this is pretty interesting, but like, I want more. Like, I know I'm capable of more. There's so much more impact I want to do. How do I make this happen? And so I feel like once I read that book, it was like, you know, everything just started to click. And I was like, what?
I make like, you know, 400,000 a month, which is still freaking crazy, till like by the end of the book, which, you know, maybe it's a year, but she's like, I'm making $1 million a year a month. And I'm like, how the heck? Like,
right?
$100,000 a month is like crazy sometimes to think about, right? So like, it's just such big numbers that I love that it like blows it out.
And it normalizes it almost. Like, I think that's the big thing too, is, you know, they talk in the book about energetic minimums and maximums. And it's the same with even like buying real estate a lot of the time. Like, I know for me, if you had told me a few years ago that I would soon be, because my next year, I really want to start looking into like boutique hostel kind of deals, just because we were kind of talking about that before. But I really love that sense of community when traveling, and like, and I want to kind of be a part of the movement. But I wouldn't have looked at $1 million, $2 million, $3 million deal like 4 years ago. That was terrifying. But I
Right.
put myself in the position where I actually put myself in Heather Blankenship's RV park mastermind, and they were dealing with such big numbers where I was like, oh, wow. Okay. So this is starting to normalize these $1 million numbers, multi-million dollar numbers. And it's like putting yourself in the space and the energy of people who are thinking way bigger than you helps expand your mind as well.
I love that. Yeah, that's a great way to go about it, because it is hard to fully know how to move those minimums.
Yeah. Oh, completely. And so I guess, for you, I remember reading online, it's like you started getting into more creative financing deals. So I guess tell me a little bit more about that. What does a creative finance deal even mean for anyone who doesn't know that? And like, how have you kind of really been able to leverage it?
Yeah, I mean, I think now that I've been in real estate so long, I'm starting to be able to see things coming that people maybe don't see as easily. So that's a great gift that comes over time. But as I saw interest rates going up, I was like, man, we're going to have to figure out some other way. People are not going to be able to get loans the traditional way. And lots of people know about seller financing. That's kind of like the low hanging fruit in creative finance. But there are so many other ways. So there are ways that you can take over someone's mortgage. So maybe they have a 2 or 3% rate, and instead of having to go out and get an 8%, you can take over the remaining of their mortgage. And there's a million other ways to do that. And there's rent to owns and all kinds of ways to pull on properties. So I think it just opens up a whole nother world for people that want to pick up more rentals for, little down, and just so many different cool terms that you can put together. So that's really opened up a fun world for me, because I had been doing Airbnbs for so long that I started to get to a place where I didn't feel challenged. And it's not that now they aren't challenging, because they so are, where you have to keep up with the Joneses and have the most beautiful place and all the amenities. That stuff is hard. But I just felt like I just knew the formula inside and out, and it was just starting to become boring. So transferring my knowledge into becoming a real estate agent, and then becoming a creative real estate agent, like all of these different iterations have kept it fresh and interesting. And even just learning about investing in syndications, like that's a whole nother beast of learning how to vet and just understand what's even happening in all these contracts. So I've definitely been able to stay under the umbrella of real estate, but keep myself growing.
Yeah. Well, and that's what people don't realize is, like, especially if you're doing, let's say you're doing single family homes, and you do single family homes for 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. You know it like the back of your hand, and everything is like, yes, every deal comes with its own challenges. That is normal, but you generally know how it's going to work. Like, how it's going to happen. You know how to pick up deals. And it's like, you need to keep expanding and growing your mind. And it could be within real estate, could be within something else. But I think, like, as humans, we are constantly seeking growth,
I don't know if that's true.
Okay. Tell me.
I think that's true for us. And I think it's true for a lot of people we hang out with. And I don't think that all humans want to grow. I think a lot of people resist it and get forced into growth because we are always changing. I think that's where a lot of midlife crises and things come up.
So I guess, though, like, for example, with the midlife crisis, are you saying that they didn't want to grow necessarily, but are just being forced into it?
Yeah, I think life is continually changing. So you can't just do the same old, same old. But yeah, I just think that not everybody wants to grow. A lot of people don't want to go to therapy. A lot of people don't read books. I think it's just
fair.
We've got a certain slice that we're used to.
But I also wonder if that's just because of lack of exposure, right? Because I'll give an example. So she's my best friend. She also works with me. We own a couple properties together. Now I actually just hired her into the Wanderlust Wealth Academy, which is my coaching program. And like a couple of years ago, I'm like there reading all my, self-development books, all of this. And she's like, gosh, no, I do not want that at all. Like, I don't want to would not listen to any, I would continue. I kept sending her podcasts, kept sending her book. I was like, I don't care if you read it if you want to, amazing. If not the end of the world. But then I really kind of started bringing her into the entrepreneurial entrepreneurial world, and her mind just like kind of started opening up to the idea of it. And now she's reading, like she's sending me stuff. Right? And so I wonder if it's just like lack of, you get so comfortable and that's all you know. So you stick with what you know, because as humans, we do like creatures comforts, right? But I don't know if it's that people don't necessarily want to. I think it's just like a resistance to change, which is like human and nature. 100%. But it's like once we go through it, we know we're better on the other end. It's like with working out,
Totally. Yeah. I mean, and I don't really mean it as a judgment. I just think it's like interest or not, right?
Yeah,
like some
that's
people
fair.
are so busy and so tired at the end of the day that all they can really manage is some Netflix. And I've been in places where it's like, gosh, I'm too tired to read. Like that's hard to imagine because I'm obsessed with reading and I have like, 10 books on my nightstand at all times. But it just depends on where you're at.
No, that's so true. I very much feel that, because when I was in corporate, I literally talk about this all the time, but I would come back from work exhausted, waking up at 3:45 in the morning, get back from work. It's like 5 or 6 p.m., take the dog out, gotta feed myself. And it's like, sit on the couch and drink wine because I'm done.
Yeah.
It's such a wild, wild, wild world. Amazing. Well, I am going to ask you the final 3 interview questions that I ask every single person on the Wanderlust Wealth Show. So, number 1, what does your ideal perfect day look like?
Oh, that's so fun. I haven't thought about this for a while. I feel like I had it written out. I think like for me, I am just a creature of like the moment. And I have such a hard time in this like more masculine framed world where it's like, oh, we have like schedules and we book things in advance and it's like so rigid. I just love to like wake up and be like, what do I feel like? Do I want to sit in my bed and read some more? Do I want to meditate? Do I want to work out? Do I want to grab a coffee with a friend? It's like, I just love being in that moment. But if I was going to say kind of like an overarching thing, I love days where I've got a lot of spaciousness. So maybe no, actual meetings or places I have to be at a certain time. And then I love spontaneity where someone's like, hey, let's go for a hike now. The weather's really beautiful. I love time in nature. So something that I can be physical, but also outside is such a great mix for me. And then, learning and discovery. I love to be kind of learning something new and having some sort of creative outlet. So I'm that's very general, but just kind of a taste of my world.
No, I absolutely love that. And, actually, a question just came to mind. So you wrote a book, which is fabulous. I literally have it somewhere in my car because I have like my whole life in my car right now. But you were a fabulous book, 30-Day Stay. What was that like? Because I've heard from so many people how difficult it can be to write a book, right? It's a lot of words, it's a lot of writing, it's a lot of dedication. And for a lot of people, labor of love. You don't make a ton of money from the book itself. So I guess what was that experience like for you?
I mean, it's such a gift. I'm so grateful that I had that opportunity and that I had the parameters in place that made it that I had to do it, right? Like I got this contract from Bigger Pockets. And of course, I came up with the idea. I went out there and I pushed it on them. And then they said yes, and I had to deliver, right? So it's so nice to have that. I also had a co-author, Sarah Weaver, and just having like a little more support from just someone else and like reading her things that would inspire other things that I wanted to write about. That dynamic was really helpful. It was really kind of like baby steps or, getting
I love that
support. But now I'm actually started writing a second book, all on creative finance, because I feel like there's just more good resources out there when I was trying to learn it. And this process has brought up a lot of interesting mind chatter. It's like I've got the demons that are like, oh, well, you've only ever written half a book and maybe it was only good because you wrote it with you, or, could you self-publish? Like there's just like so many questions about worth and doubt. So I have to get over all those humps. But the actual act of writing and the creative flow that it creates is just like the most beautiful, pure space. And I sometimes think about quitting my whole life. Because I feel like I could be such a balanced, like calm human.
Oh my gosh.
We'll see.
I love that. Well, that's like, did you see, I think Amanda Francis has a course on how to write books or like how to self-publish and all that stuff too.
Yeah, I know. I don't know. I have this weird thing about courses is like, I find that it's hard for me to motivate to like stay on task, which is why I have like my little groups now, my accountability group.
Totally.
But I feel resistant to getting more courses. So I'm like, I just want to figure it out myself or talk to friends.
No, that's so fair. So fair. Okay, well, question number 2. What is your mantra?
Oh my gosh. It's funny because I have poop. It's so good. I have my little drip. It's got my little pictures because I like don't even poop right off the top of my head. I mean, I'd say so much of my life is about looking for the magic.
Yeah.
Is the one that like it's written here, but I have a ton of other mantras here because I love just writing stuff that inspires me. But that was the first one. It's just like my husband is kind of a science-based person, so he doesn't believe as much in magic, and I'm just like full magic. I'm like,
I love it.
Know how it works, you know? Magic me. And so I love looking for the mystery of life, just being like, I'm giving myself over to like the magic of how something can be better than I can imagine.
I like toggle in between. So because I used to be a chemical engineer and now like I've really dived more into the spiritual and the magic. And like, I think that there's just so much more out there in terms of forces that can't be explained by science. But then there's so much like of the practical and the science that I'm like, yeah, this is like helps you kind of like create more structure. But I love I flow between both sides all the time. Oh my gosh. Okay. Well, last question. What does wealth mean to you?
It's funny because I always go back to freedom, and that's why I love financial independence, and that's why I love real estate. And it's interesting that this pursuit of wealth, chasing it, makes me less free. And so there's times that I think about, like, what if I just sold everything and then slowly, like, let it disappear, you know, just like stop.
Yeah.
I can't. So it's a weird balance of being like, how do I make enough to a point where I can like let go and be totally free?
Yeah. Well, and it's also weird because it's like, in order to be more free, a lot of the time too, you have to create boundaries, right? Like, so I find myself putting in more structure to give myself more time when I can be free, like fully free, you know? And it's just such a weird concept to take on.
Totally. And I feel like it ebbs and flows so much. It like tricks me. I'm like, oh, I feel like I've totally got it mastered. And then like something happens and you're like, nope, free. That's events.
Oh my gosh, I love that. Well, thank you so much, Zeona. This was wonderful. If anyone wants to reach out to you, maybe they want to do a creative financing deal, maybe they just want to learn from you about medium-term rentals, where should they reach out to you?
Yeah, so I have a website, ZeonaMcIntyre.com, and Instagram I'm the most active. So if you want to find me there, Zeona McIntyre is my handle.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much. This was fabulous.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to Wanderlust Wealth Show. Now, don't forget to follow the podcast, or if you're watching on YouTube, make sure to hit that subscribe button. If you love this episode, it would literally mean the world to me if you shared this with a friend or a family member, or literally like anyone off of the street. Like right now, go ahead, share it so you don't forget, or post it on social media and make sure to tag me. I love seeing what you're listening in on and what you resonated with, and I'm just so freaking thankful for you. I'm so freaking excited for you. I love you, and don't forget, life really doesn't have to be hard.